This could be a DeWALT killer. This is the Harbor Freight's Hercules Table Saw, and it's surprisingly good. Let's go. So Harbor Freight has come a very long way in a short period of time over the last couple of years, coming out with some really good tools for us woodworkers. Now this is no exception. I visited a Harbor Freight one time, looked at their table saw, and just frowned upon it because I hated that fence that was on it. And then they released this not too long after. This is the Hercules 10-inch table saw. Now this table saw is a 15-amp table saw, packed full of features. We're going to put it through the paces, and I'll compare it to my DeWALT. While this is an 8 1/4, there's some very good similarities here. If you'd like to check out any of these tools I showed today, there'll be a link in the description and a pinned comment to help you find it easier. First and foremost, the table saw is very well packaged, and I do appreciate that because you don't want something like this getting bunged up in shipping. There's a lot of good packaging here. Even underneath it, there's a lot of styrofoam and stuff in there to keep your motor and all that from moving around. So when you first open the top of the box, you get the parts and pieces. You got the fence, there's a blade guard, anti-kickback paws, and of course the cheap, dinky little miter gauge that comes with all saws. Even the $4,000 saw stop comes with a piece of garbage miter gauge. Do better, people. And the blade is pre-installed. Now, other than that, that's pretty much it. You just set the fence in place, snap it down, and you're good to go. You want to make sure your fence is aligned to your miter slot is aligned to your blade, and if that's true, you're good to go. If not, there's some adjustments that can be made. Of course, those are all in the manual, but for the fence, there's just a couple of Allen bolts on the end. You can just loosen those and move those whichever way you need. And on the motor, actually, there's 4 bolts underneath there that you could adjust. Now, to me, the star of any table saw is the fence. And again, like I said, I had originally looked at Harbor Freight's table saw and told people not to buy it. And that was their previous version of this because it had a little fence that's just very difficult to get square. I hate those fences. Now this has a rack and pinion fence, and I think this is the perfect style of fence for a contractor or job site saw. I love this fence on the Skill, on the Cobalt, and on my DeWALT. It just works well for this style because it's gear driven and the gears move at the same time on the front and the back, so your fence stays square all the time. And if you can get good, accurate square cuts on a table saw, next level. And of course, to move the fence is really easily. There's a lock lever here. Just pull it towards you. That unlocks it. Then you can use the twist handle to move it anywhere, or you can literally just slide it with your hand. Then when you get it where you want it, you just lock that in place so it doesn't move. Now, speaking of the fence, it also has a high-low feature, which a lot of these job site style saws have that, but it flips out of the way when you don't need it. It flips down when you do need it for thin stock, or it drops down another level to give you a little bit of an extra support in that big opening there if you're cutting small sheet goods and things like that. And you get 0 to 45 degree bevel cut should you need that, and it's really easy to move that along the way. Now this throat plate is metal, which is really good because it doesn't flex or bend or push down, because there are some saws that have a plastic throat plate that gives too much, especially in this price range, but this is not. Now inside you'll see a riving knife that you can't take off. I really wish you could take it off, because if you could, then maybe you could fit a dado stack on there. Probably wouldn't fit a full dado stack, but you might could get at least a few blades on there. But since you can't take this off, you're kind of stuck with what you got. So if you need a dado stack, probably look somewhere else, unless you can figure out how to take that off. But this will raise and lower, one that says through cut, one that says non-through cut, so you can move that up and down fairly easily. Now putting on the blade guard, very easy, it snaps right on, and there are anti-kickback paws also included with that. They're like little teeth that will catch that kickback should it occur. Like I said, you get a full 10-inch size blade, and I'm quite impressed with the blade that comes on it because, again, with the $4,000 saw stop, it comes with not a very good blade at all. Like it's not good. But this is really good. I love these type blades on these saws because they work well, especially right out of the box. You can go to work. The DeWALT is the same way. It has a really nice blade on it. Of course, all of this stuff will store on board. So you got a cord wrap on one side, the fence can store down on the other side, and you could basically take this to and from the job site should you need to. Now I like this style of power button because you push the green button to power it on, and then when you're ready to stop, you can just hit the big red paddle and it goes off. Works well. You can even lock this out should you need to. So as far as the tabletop goes, you get a pretty generous sized tabletop for a saw this size. 21 3/4 by 24.5, give or take. And you get 24.5 inches of rip capacity, or slightly thereover. But none of that matters if it doesn't perform. So let's take it outside, see what she can do. First thing I want to do is cut plywood, and it cut it good. It was really good. Like no splintering or anything, like really nice clean cuts on plywood, thanks to this nice 40-tooth blade that they included. That's actually very smooth. I was very surprised by that. and super clean cut. So the blade that comes on there is actually really nice as well. Good job, Harbor Freight. To make sure that wasn't a mistake, I tried it again and got clean cuts again. Quite impressive. Of course, I wanted to see what it was going to perform like with hardwoods, because as woodworkers, you're not a contractor, you want this thing to perform. So I went ahead and tried it with some leopard wood, pretty good dense wood here. It cut right through it once I figured out there was a notch keeping me from pushing it past the fence. Check both sides of the wood before you cut. Cut right through the leopard wood, no problem at all. Really nice clean cut as well, not burning or anything like that, which is what you want to see. Now I also picked up this 1.5 inch, a little over 1.5 inch thick piece of walnut to see how it was going to perform with that, because thicker woods, sometimes these smaller saws have a problem with. This one didn't. Right through it, no problem, good clean cut, quite impressive. Of course, you could also cross cut with this just using your standard miter gauge. I highly recommend not keeping this or using this. It's just not good. It may do okay, but if you pick up something like the Incra V27, I'll link to it and these other ones in the description, it works so much better, and it's just a much better made tool for less than $100 bucks. Of course, you can cross cut with that. You can batch out the same size pieces, however you need to do that. Now, I'm using a 1-2-3 block here so that it spaces it off exactly 2 inches away from the fence, and then I can touch my piece up to that every time. And the reason you do that is you don't want to get pieces jammed between the fence and your blade. So you get that little offset piece there. That helps. And as far as accuracy goes, you see I stacked all these pieces up, perfectly accurate. Like they're all exactly the same. This is a 3/4 inch standard size slot, so you can use any standard miter gauge that you want. The Incra fits. I used the Vevor one that I reviewed a while back. They hang off a little bit too far, the Vevor one does, but the Woodpeckers one, which is about the same price as the Vevor, maybe a little bit more, it fit too. Any one that you want to use on here is gonna work because it has standard slots, and you like to see that on a table saw. Now, before we compare this to the DeWALT, which is what Harbor Freight always compares the Hercules line to, is the DeWALT tools. We're gonna compare those two and see how they stack up. You may have saw me using this when I was cutting that plywood. This is a bow extender fence. This is a huge way to upgrade any table saw. It doesn't matter if you're using a cabinet saw or especially an upgrade to these job site saws, because it gives in-feed and out-feed supports. There's even a video showing how to make this even better that I made. I'll link to in the description, but you can build jigs and things like that just to help with the out-feed part of it. This is a massive upgrade, fits right onto the standard table saw fence, and it just works well. Holds that material down to prevent kickback with these feather boards, and what I love most are these in-feed and out-feed supports. That bow fence is linked in the description, and it's a little bit of a pricey upgrade, but for someone working in a small space, or if you're going to a job site, being able to take this on and off, having in-feed and out-feed support is a huge upgrade for any saw, in my opinion. Probably no secret that I love this little saw. This is a little 8 1/4 DeWALT saw. Not the exact same size, but there's a lot of similarities here. Motor's a little bit more powerful, which we're not even worried about comparing here, and the blade's bigger, obviously. But the style of the fence and the way everything operates is very, very similar, and I've been using this one for a while, so I think I can give a fair comparison here. On the DeWALT, the fence works better. And the reason I say that is it just moves easier. There's a positive snap when you lock and unlock the fence, and it's very easy to move. On the Hercules, it is quite stiff to try to move. And while I don't really care for that, it's not a huge deal, but it is quite noticeable that it is much harder to move, and there's not a positive snap when you lock it down, like on the DeWALT. And the only other minor thing that I like better on the DeWALT, and it's very minor, and that is the scale on top. One is yellow, one is white, depending on which notch you set your fence on, whether you're going to get close to the blade or go to max rip capacity. It's just easier to read, in my opinion, but that's a very minor nitpick, because everything else about this saw is quite impressive. Very clean cuts, very powerful, doing everything you need to, and it's not super loud. The Skill, whoo, that thing was loud. This one, it's not, I mean, it's not quiet, but it's also not just deafening loud. It's easily adjustable. You can dial this right in. I think for the price point, this is a very nice saw, because the comparable DeWALT saw to this is about a couple $100 more than this Hercules. Now, if you compare this to the Skill, which is one of my favorite budget level table saws to date, and still is today, even after reviewing this, for a couple of reasons. I really like those legs that fold out, because if you're just in a small shop or you're going site to site, you don't have to have an extra stand. They're already included. They fold down really easily, fold up easily, and it had plenty of power to cut through anything that I want. And it does have 1 inch more cut capacity, if that matters, at about 25.5. Now, as far as the power goes, no difference there in this versus that. Both 15 amp motors, both putting out plenty of power. The Skill was quite a bit louder though. But the Skill and this both share the rack and pinion fence. I think the Skill works slightly better. This one's just a little stiff, like I was talking about with the DeWALT. Now there's a few things I don't like about this saw that I would change if I had the say-so, which I don't. But first and foremost is the miter gauge. I've complained about that. I don't like it. I think there's better options out there, but there it is. Also, I don't like this push stick. While I will use one occasionally, I don't care for them because these things have been shown, or many people have gotten hurt by these. If you're in many woodworking groups, you'll see these. If they get hit by the blade, sometimes they can shatter. And it just depends on what conditions they've been exposed to. So if it get hot and cold, over time they get brittle, or can be. Not saying this one would, but some do, and I just don't like them. You can make your own push stick. A friend of mine sells his. You may have saw me using it earlier. Nice little cleat on the back. I like that it has that pressure all the way across the board, and it keeps your hands up and away from the blade. If you want to check one of those out, I'll put a link in the description to All Red Woodworks. I do wish the fence would glide a little easier and snap a little more. Other than that, those are all minor nitpicks, and I think this is a fantastic saw for this price. If you're a fan of Harbor Freight tools, you got to check out the Hercules Dust Extractor review right there. Click in the box, get you the big old virtual fist pump, or the Skill Table Saw review right there.